Thank you again for everyone who's online live with us today. Thank you for joining, taking time out of your very busy morning to be with us today. Today we are talking about Triple M and Meridian. So MMM is an extremely hot topic at the moment. I'm sure you've felt the buzz growing in the market and you've seen plenty of content around this topic at the moment. So we're going to dive in deep today. Now, unfortunately, Suman, who was going to lead a bunch of this content, is off sick today. So you are stuck with me. And I do not profess to be a Triple M expert, but thankfully I'm also here with Morgan from Suman's team. Morgan is a data analytics lead at XPON and is definitely more of an expert in the Triple M space than myself. But I'll be just giving a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of context around the why. And then we'll dive into more about, I guess, the how. So yeah, here's the agenda. Thanks, Morgan, for putting that up. So the measurement reset, why we're here, a new/old approach, which is all around Triple M and why it's sort of making a comeback and a resurgence. Then we're going to talk about, why now and why is it more accessible and powerful now for most marketers with things like Google's Meridian now available. We're also going to touch on a little bit around the intersection between Triple M, Multi-Touch Attribution, and Incrementality. We've only got 45 minutes, so we can't go too deep on that whole piece, but we're also going to be providing a playbook that we've just published at the end of this webinar as well to everyone who's registered and attended, which will go a little bit deeper into that concept and that framework for unified measurement. And just as a final reminder on the Q&A, I mentioned at the start, if any questions pop up throughout, please throw them in the chat. There's a question sections or a chat section, either is fine. We've got dedicated time at the end to go through any questions and answer those for you live. Awesome. So just to touch on a little bit of context, maybe if we pop to the next slide, Morgan. Now, data privacy, we've been talking about this for a few years. I think it's just really good to move up a little bit and just have a think about why we are talking about Triple M again today, given that Triple M has been around for a long time. And I'm sure everyone knows about the shifting data privacy landscape, the fact that there's obviously global regulation around data privacy, and it's actually growing more and more strict, specifically in Australia and New Zealand at the moment as well. And then the impact that has on obviously big tech and how data can be collected and how user behavior can be measured across different technology platforms that we use every day as marketers. And then obviously also the impact on consumer behavior and the understanding generally in the population around how their data is used and collected, and then what rights they have over their own data and how that can be shared with different advertisers or brands. So all of this is obviously happened very quickly in the last sort of 3 to 5 years and is continuing to evolve. And this is really, I guess, pushing what we're calling that measurement reset, where we're rethinking about how Triple M and other measurement methodologies like MTA and incrementality can be used in tandem to give us that really accurate way of measuring marketing performance and then also deciding what we do next with our budgets. Moving on to the next slide. So this is actually a statistic from last year, and I personally believe this number probably has gone up since this research was done. But around 2/3 last year of marketers were starting to really realize that the measurement models they had and the attribution models they had weren't adequate, in line with all of the data privacy changes and the broader macro impacts of data privacy regulations. Obviously, there's a lot of signal loss for us as marketers, which makes it extremely hard to measure user behavior very accurately and then also make marketing decisions off that. And I think most of the marketing industry is starting to really get privy to the fact that the models and the measurement methods that they're using today aren't necessarily as accurate and as trustworthy as they once were, and now looking to find different solutions so that they can really hang their hat on budget decisions and marketing strategies that they know are going to work because they know that their measurement foundations are as accurate as possible. So with that context, again, I'm going to throw it to someone who's a little bit more of an expert in the Triple M space than me. Morgan, I'll throw it to you, mate. If you want to give a quick introduction to yourself, and I'll let you take the reins on content from here, mate.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a data analytics lead at XPON. So my role is working directly with clients to improve things like attribution and implement new measurement techniques. So we've established, or Tim's established, that these previous or these current measurement approaches are starting to break down a bit. So we are starting to have more unobservable data, and that is leading to some gaps in attribution. So how do we move forward, and how do we get back to making decisions with confidence? This kind of requires us to take a step back to a previous approach, a new old approach, as it were, which is mixed marketing mix modeling, also known as media mix modeling, or MMM. So what is MMM? MMM is a statistical modeling technique that aims to understand the impact of your marketing spend. So what it does is it measures the contribution and efficacy of your marketing investment as a whole, and then also breaks that down into the individual marketing channels and measures their impact on revenue and also their efficacy, so on the return on investment. It takes into account things like seasonality, pricing, and brand share, and kind of strips that all off to allow you to look at the real direct impact of your marketing investment. In its simplest form, really, MMM is just taking the historical data of your marketing spend and your revenue and determining which of these have the biggest impact on conversions. And then ultimately, this is used to drive predictions on your most effective spend across all of your different media channels. So MMM, in short, really is a kind of a top level marketing budgeting model. To understand where we are now and why MMM is being brought back, let's take a little step back into the history of MMM. So MMM relies on econometric techniques that well predate this graph, but MMM as a model really kicked off in earnest in the 80s with the arrival of more accessible data from spreadsheets and retail scanners, and this made cleaner and more accessible data, or cleaner and more accurate data available to be used for modeling marketing effectiveness. MMM really became the gold standard in the 1990s and early 2000s, but really the MMMs of those days were incredibly complex. They required a lot of marketing investment for them to be accurate, and they required very intensive resources from very skilled econometricians. So really, they were most useful, really only useful for the top companies. With the rise of digital marketing in the 90s and early 2000s, we now got observable user journeys powered by technology like cookies. So this led in a shift in preference away from MMMs to more easily available granular cookie-based attribution modeling, where we can see the user's journey from ad click to site to conversion. And then, of course, as we all know, in the last 10 years or so, privacy regulations like GDPR came into effect, tech changes like Apple's iOS came into effect, and there's just been a consistent depreciation of third-party cookies, which is increasing, which is decreasing these observable user journeys. So these observable attribution models began to degrade, and now marketers are starting to realize that we need to fill in the gap somewhere along these journeys. And then this has led to a look back into the past to pick up MMM. So MMM is really now being looked towards as the privacy safe measurement solution. It doesn't rely on observable user journeys. We don't need to know which user has clicked on an ad and which one has converted. It's agnostic of all that stuff, and we can use that as a more reliable privacy safe solution. On top of that, with the recent improvements in AI and machine learning, these tools are now, or MMM as a tool, is more accessible than it ever has been, more transparent, and just more readily available for a wider range of businesses. And this is where Google's Meridian comes in. So Google's Meridian is Google's open source MMM that's completely customizable to your business, your goals, and it removes many of the historical cost and resource blockers that plagued historical MMMs. So the process is now transparent, it's accessible. There are lots of resources available to help companies make the most out of these models. Meridian has a lot of the features of traditional MMMs, which will allow you to ask questions like, what was the return on my advertising spend? How can I optimize my budget allocation? What would be the impact of increasing revenue towards my overall, increasing revenue in one particular channel? How would that impact overall revenue? But it also has some key out-of-the-box features that set it apart from other MMMs, like geo-based modeling, incorporating performance media like search ads and AI-powered campaigns, and also adding data like reach, frequency, and even Google search query volume into the mix. So Meridian really, as a tool, like a lot of MMMs, are built for incrementality testing. So the model relies on something called Bayesian causal inference, which is a method that allows you to blend your prior knowledge with real-world data. So you can take the results of incrementality experiments that have been suggested by the model, take those results, feed that back into the prior knowledge that the model uses, creating this feedback loop where the model learns over time and starts to reveal the true incremental impact of your marketing. So how does the roadmap for a typical MMM like Meridian look like? Starts with data, of course. So we need to prepare and clean the data ready for the model. At the very least, the model needs the marketing costs of each channel split by the time of when that spend occurred. So this is usually weekly, almost effectively weekly, but can also be monthly or daily. And then we need to also have the historical data of your KPIs, which is typically revenue, but it can also be a non-monetary conversion as well. Meridian, as I just mentioned, can also integrate much more granular data like impressions, like reach, like frequency, like query search volume. We can even split this out into branded and non-branded, and we can even segment that further into geos as well. Once we've got that all together, we start the model setup and calibration stages. So this is where we start, where the model is starting to be customized to your business and your industry, taking into account factors like seasonality, like brand share and pricing and so on. And then the model will then train on the data we've just given it. So we ingest the data into the model, and the model will train, and we refine the accuracy of the model. As a result, Meridian spits out some strategic, insights and reporting on the impact and the efficacy of each marketing channel, how much each marketing channel has contributed to the overall revenue, and also the return on investment from each marketing channel. From this, the model will also give strategic recommendations by suggesting reallocations of budgets across different channels. And that these are the results that will influence our incrementality experiments and tell us, okay, we need to shift some budget from display into paid search and test it that way, and then feedback those results over time. So as we run these incrementality experiments, we take the results of that experiment, we feed that back into the prior knowledge that the model takes, and then the model continues to learn and grow as we run these experiments and run the model over time. So MMM is a really powerful tool, but just because older attribution or our current attribution models are degraded slightly doesn't mean that we should just throw them out completely. In fact, it's really powerful when we start combining media mixed modeling, MMM, with other modeling that we have at the moment, like multi-touch attribution modeling. So when we combine these two together with incrementality experiments, we start to see a fuller picture of our marketing performance and give us a bit more direction on our experiments and where we should be optimizing our spend. So what is multi-touch attribution, or MTA, just to throw another acronym in the mix? MTA provides granular insights into touch points that influence customers along their journey to a conversion. So what it does, it looks at the entire journey that the user has taken towards a conversion, and it distributes credit for that conversion across the different touch points, depending on how it assesses the impact of each of those touch points. So for instance, we could have a user that has viewed a YouTube ad, then they have viewed a Facebook ad, and then they have clicked on a Google search ad, and then they have converted. MTA is going to look at the impact of each of those touch points towards that conversion, and then distribute credit accordingly. Of course, this does rely on observation. So we need to see that observable user journey that we talked about before, which of course is being degraded somewhat by privacy factors, by tech factors, and so on. But paired with MMM, we can start to fill in the gaps that we have in both models to provide us a fuller picture. So MMM really provides this bigger picture of how we can optimize our budget across the different channels. And MTA fills in the gaps here, showing the complete customer journey. So when we combine the two, we're going to get a bit more of a holistic picture that's far greater than the sum of their parts, and it's going to give us a bit more direction towards these incrementality experiments, and towards where we can start shifting budget into very specific campaigns, for instance, not just channels. So let's take a real world example. Let's imagine a travel company promoting travel packages across channels like display, email, paid search, paid social, and partnership. This is an example of an output of Meridian's MMM. It's showing us the impact of our marketing spend on a holistic level. So the proportion of our revenue that's attributed to marketing versus baseline factors like seasonality, like brand share, etc. It will also break that out further. So we got our marketing share, and we have also got the specific share of the marketing channels that we have invested in. So we can see from this graph, for instance, we've got the contribution and also the return on investment as well. So this graph, for instance, in the results of this model, is showing us that paid search is a key driver of our revenue and also has the highest return on investment. On the other end of the scale, we've got display. Display is one of the lowest drivers of revenue, or lowest contributors of revenue, and also has one of the lowest returns on investment. MMM takes the analysis from the previous slide, and then it makes some suggestions around budget reallocation. So in this instance, MMM is telling us to move a large proportion of our budget from display and distribute that across the different channels. So for instance, to take 7 million from display, distribute that to the other channels, 1.3 million of that being paid search. It's given us some predictions of the uplift in revenue as a consequence of this, and also the uplift in return on investment. So of course, you're not going to move $7 million of revenue straight away as a result of one model. But what this is aiming to do is aiming to provide us information towards an incrementality experiment that we can run to prove or or to prove the hypothesis of whether this is going to show us an uplift in revenue. So we're going to want to take some money from display, and we want to move that to a channel like paid search and to test the uplift. So this is great. We know that we need to shift some budget around from display into paid search, but where in paid search? And that's where MTA can come in. So MTA can be run alongside MMM and then provide some similar results in terms of showing us the efficacy of and contribution of some media channels. So this graph, for instance, is showing us that, or it's kind of reinforcing the previous or MMM's findings that search is indeed a key factor in revenue, and specifically generic search is the primary part of search, which is driving our key revenue. So this is starting to fill in those gaps now. MTA also gives us an analysis of the converting parts. So not just showing us the contribution of each channel, it's showing us how popular each path is and where does a touch point occur in a user's journey. MTA in this case is showing us that not only generic search is particularly important, but that generic search is at the start of a user's journey. And it's indicating that it's the critical first touch point for a converting user. So something that a touch point that is driving awareness, for instance, and is the kind of critical key first step. So armed with these insights from MMM, we know that we need to optimize some of our budget by testing, moving some of budget away from display ads into search ads. And from MTA, we get the information that we need to specifically invest that money into top of funnel generic search ads. So in this way, we can unlock a much more powerful and intelligent optimization strategy. Firstly, we're gaining more accurate attribution. We're combining different models together to give us a fuller picture to plug in those gaps that we're seeing from a lack of observable data. This is directing us towards more powerful budget allocation. So we know we're getting an idea of where we should be shifting our money to, not just at a channel level, but also even at nearly at a campaign level. And then finally, we're improving marketing effectiveness here. So we're kind of understanding the true impact of the way that our channels are interacting with each other. And it's also allowing us to target the right customers at the right time across their entire user journey.
Awesome, mate. You flew through that, which is great. That leaves more time for questions. I actually have some questions myself, as well as I think there's a couple in the chat from Nash. And yeah, if anyone else has questions, please throw them in. We'll jump straight into those after this. As I mentioned at the start, we've got a bit of a playbook which goes a bit deeper around the how, around implementation of MMM, MTA, and incrementality as sort of a unified set of measurement strategies. Within that, there's also a high-level 90-day plan, which our team have sort of put together as the jobs to be done to implement these solutions and achieve the essential measurement goals that you're after. So please keep an eye out for that. It should be hitting your inboxes tomorrow morning around 9 a.m. So keep an eye out. That's Australian time. In terms of questions, so before we jump to Nash's questions that are already in there, I had a couple. So firstly, if I'm a brand and I don't have a solid MTA set up already, would I prioritize implementation of MMM first, or would I do them in tandem, or would I focus on MTA first?
It's most effective in tandem, but they do work well separately. So MMM can still provide that top level view of budget reallocation, and MMMs have been used traditionally without this extra knowledge from MTAs. So they can definitely be used together, but you can also separate them out. I would say there are a lot. MTA is more readily available, so you can get a version of MTA through tools like Google Analytics, for instance. So it's kind of easier to integrate into your attribution modeling straight away, or your kind of attribution understanding. But MMM will provide that a bit more of a holistic view on budget reallocation.
Awesome, that makes sense. Thank you. And then could you just give a little, just a quick insight, I guess, into the MMM solution landscape? You mentioned like there's other solutions out there. Meridian is the one that we're obviously working with predominantly. I guess, yeah, it's seemingly most accessible given it's open source. It's somewhat seemingly easier to implement. Like, how does that compare to, I guess, some of the other solutions in the market?
Yeah, so there are lots of vendors which will which offer MMM solutions that are not open source. And then there are a few other open source models that are available actually. So Facebook Robin is one, and Uber also has one. They all have different advantages, of course, which tend to be skewed towards their company. So Facebook have Meridian's quite good at integrating things like Google search volume and kind of key search ad performance there. Facebook have a powerful model called Profit, which is very good at impacting seasonality, assessing seasonality and things like that. Profit there are some Meridian users who are implementing Profit with Meridian, I've seen. And Uber has things like very good time decay modeling, which is kind of like they're used for their sort of how quickly people are being picked up by cabs and things like that. So there are lots of different options available. Meridian is quite simple. I'd say kind of you can strip it back quite a lot, potentially more so than the other models, I'd say. So as an entry point, it's definitely Meridian. I think is probably the easiest. That being said, lots of companies will test all the different models side by side to see the results.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I like that test and learn approach. Cool. I think that nicely leads into Nash's first question around how to avoid the agreement bias that we see in many different MMMs, where the solution usually approves the current hypothesis of the marketing leaders. Yeah,
that's a great question. So this is relating to that point around prior knowledge that I mentioned before. So Meridian will take some aspect, so an understanding of your prior knowledge, and blends that with real world data. So what that means is you give Meridian a bit of an understanding of what you feel is the current ROI of your marketing channels, and that will usually based on should be usually based on data like existing data from existing MTA models, or even last click attribution or something like that. And Nash's question really, I think, is around how can we avoid the model over giving too much sort of weight towards that prior knowledge and not enough weight towards the real world data. So really, that it's true that most MMMs can suffer from that. I think the strength of the approach when you pair it with MTA is to try and lead that prior knowledge away from the kind of I think that paid search has an ROI of 1.1, and more so looking at your existing MTA models and your incrementality experiments, and using those real world experiments as your prior knowledge instead of this sort of gut feeling. So that's kind of how you will try to avoid that agreement bias. That is kind of baked into a lot of MMMs, is by negating, is by not using hunch for that, is by using actual data.
Awesome. I think that then also leads nicely into Amy's question. Nash, we'll come back to your other question shortly. Amy, on the prior data piece you mentioned there, Morgan, she asked, how do you choose the best control or prior data? And how do you decide which control priors to use if you're running multiple campaigns with different goals? Is it best to prioritize top of funnel metrics, clicks, impressions, etc., or bottom of funnel goals, revenue conversion, etc., for optimizations?
Yeah, another good question. I think from the perspective of Meridian, so Meridian likes to try and use reach and frequency, well, as well as clicks and impression, but its modeling is or one of the advantages of Meridian is to also include reach and frequency. I would say, yeah, it really depends on the right control and prior to use. Really will depend, or the right metric really depend on the sorts of aims of your campaigns. I would say it'd be very business specific, so there is not really one size fits all solution, and that's kind of the advantage of the open source models that we have with Meridian, is that it is customizable, so we can choose back and forth, and we can do some testing. So you can run two models side by side and you can see the results. So we can see one model using these controls and priors is saying this thing, and one model is saying the other thing. Now that will just inform an incrementality experiment. So test the one hypothesis from one model, test the other hypothesis from the other model, which has the more effective uplift in revenue.
Excellent. That's very clear. Thank you, Morgan. Great. Flicking back to Nash's other question, how does Meridian take into account non-digital elements into the perspective while driving results?
In much the same way as a traditional MMMs. So you will still use spend like TV spend or newspaper spend or kind of print spend in your models. It's just with digital channels, you just have the extra advantage of granular data. Now that doesn't mean that the models are going to overestimate the impact of your digital channels just because you've got that granular data. It just means that they can kind of assess the ROI a bit better for that channel.
Awesome. I think you've just then answered Nash's new question, which is, can Meridian take into account metrics measured outside of Google's platforms like brand awareness, brand preference, sales, and revenue uplift? It sounds like yes, it absolutely can.
Yeah, so Meridian will kind of roll that into a baseline, and specifically for like marketing spend outside of Google platforms, they can definitely also take that in. So it will just take, if it is platform agnostic, so it will take your impression data from Facebook, from TikTok, from all the other platforms, and include that in modeling as well.
Awesome. And then Kurt's also got a question, which industries do you find having the greatest benefit from this approach?
So typically, it's similar to traditional MMs in that respect. So it will be kind of retail, kind of B2C industries really. It can somewhat be used for B2B industries, but you need to have a sizable marketing spend. So Meridian or MMMs usually require a fairly significant marketing spend. Meridian and these open source solutions less so, but usually you need probably around like 1 million maybe marketing spend for you to really get the benefit of Meridian. And it's more so about the marketing spend versus the industries, I'd say.
Awesome. Question from Chris. To what extent is Meridian a plug and play solution versus something requiring a lot of coding, tweaking, and deep data science / mathematics?
So there's a lot of resources online, specifically around Meridian, and it has a very strong support group. So Google, you'll have data scientists from Google that are available to support you. That's which is great, and a lot of resources online. You still need some specific skills though to implement it. Like not quite a plug and play solution. You can attempt to do it yourself, but if you run into things like model overfitting and things like that, you need some skills around it. You need some statistical analysis skills to figure out why is that the case. So there can be lots of issues where your model might be returning, say, like strangely like a negative baseline, telling you that you don't have any money coming in, or you get a model that is too accurate. So that means that the model is overfit on your data, which means that it's really good at predicting historical data, but it takes too much of the random fluctuations in account, and that actually reduces its prediction ability. So it's definitely a low. It's never been as easy as it is now to use a tool like MMM, but you still need some statistical skills, I think, to overcome any difficulties.
Sounds like what you're saying is it's actually easier to just work with a partner like XPON, right? No, couldn't help myself. We don't sell on these things, but I just couldn't help myself. Cool. And the final question that's come in from Amy: when using Meridian, are there any assumptions beyond the standard Bayesian ones that we need to account for?
Yeah, so I probably want to take this one offline if that's okay, Amy, just to make sure that I'm answering correctly. The Bayesian ones you can set many priors essentially. You've got lots of different customizable priors. I just want to make sure that I understand your question correctly and answer them correctly. That's okay.
Yeah, cool. We'll reach out to you, Amy, over email and get an answer for you that's crystal clear. Awesome. That was amazing. Oh, one more question. Oh no, thanks, Amy. Cool. Sounds good. That was a great discussion. Thank you for the very good questions. Hopefully we've answered those all well enough for you. We appreciate you spending the time. We're almost at the 45-minute mark, so we might wrap up there. But yeah, we appreciate you joining us. You'll get a version of this recording straight to your inbox today, and then you'll get a copy of the playbook first thing tomorrow morning. If you've got any other questions, you can obviously reach out to myself or Morgan or just XPON via any of our channels, and we'll get some answers back to you. And thanks again. We'll see you all later. Cheers.
Thank you.